name is Ware, and I'm an academic life coach, and I currently live in Denver, Colorado. My story is one of continuously learning. It's one of figuring out how to follow Jesus, what that looks like in this world, and how to use the skills he's given me to love people. It's one of deep relationships, and in those relationships, I get to be a daughter and a sister and a wife and a mentor and a friend, and most recently a mom. It's a big one. I've always been a people person since I was little. I think I started talking at some ridiculously young age, and I don't think I've stopped. And so I've always been a people person and loved being part of groups and teams and clubs and things like that. I don't think I could have articulated this when I was little, but I love being part of something bigger than myself. There's just so much, purpose and meaning behind that. That's another thing I would tell young people is like, oh, don't search for happiness, search for meaning, because the happiness is a byproduct of that, you know? And fast forward to college, I majored in psychology, the study of people, and really fascinating, kind of a double-edged sword though, because you're like, so what do I do next? Or everything. And so I decided to go into the field of education, and I've worked in education ever since I've graduated from college. And gosh, in so many different capacities. I've worked in special needs classrooms, I've taught PE, I've taught math, leadership, online learning, a reading class, a homework club. I mean, you name it, I've probably done some lesson around it. And some of the teaching, my latest teaching situation just wasn't sustainable. And so I switched to the nonprofit world, but also involved in education. And it was so fun because we got to push into schools and teach anywhere from third graders to 12th graders. We got to have these conversations around character education and drug education and healthy relationships. And it was so fun because kids love talking about that. It was always really embarrassing if I saw some of the kids like out in the community, they'd be like, hey, it's the drug lady. And I'm like, okay, maybe we could call drug education lady. So that was always a kick. I'm like, please don't call me the drug lady, the anti-drug lady, maybe. Explain it to your parents if they're standing next to you. But I love working with young people. And one of the cool things about working in education is, in my job at least, I had summers off. And so I got to pursue things that I was really interested in. I said my life is one of continuous learning. And so I got to become a certified yoga instructor. I've gotten to pursue 1 and 2.0 coach training. My husband and I coached a varsity boys soccer team together. I've been involved in Young Life for a very long time. And so it's kind of just this evolving thing where I'm kind of always doing like a deep dive into some subject. And I can't talk about my story without talking about my love of books. I sincerely, it's kind of this, I love hanging out with people and talking and having conversation. And I also like to like hold myself up and read like an entire book. So it's this very, very paradoxical person. But my current situation is my husband and I live in Denver, Colorado, and he's going to law school. And I am the CEO of Ware Incorporated. So I'm kind of running the place right now. And my deep dive that I'm just learning so much about is motherhood. And I'm realizing, I love reading different books from moms from different countries and how they parent and all these things. But each kid is so specific and each mom is so different. So that's been really, really fun. But yeah, that's kind of where my story is right now. And I'm excited to see kind of where our journeys take us in the next few years. What inspired me to become a coach was 10 years ago. I met these 2 phenomenal women when I was on a theology retreat of all places. And they had this light about them. They were really like confident and fun. And they were amazing. And they happened to be professional life coaches. And so I got to know them throughout that week. And they invited me to like a weekend coaching seminar. And I went and I fell in love with the model of coaching. I got so excited about it. It was one of those things where I don't know, when you learn something new and you think everybody should care as much as you, and I was telling everybody about it and people were like, okay, sure. And this was, 10 years ago. So coaching definitely was not even, it was more of like, are you a sports coach? What do you, so I knew I wanted to pursue it at some point, but I did not have the funds or the space or the capacity at that time. So I also have volunteered with an organization called Young Life, and it's people who love Jesus and care about young people. And it's kind of a mentorship thing. You just walk with them through the ups and downs of life. And I would have all of these amazing conversations where kids would spill their heart or ask me my advice. And I so many times would be like, I have no idea. And I would feel like I needed to answer in some really smart way, or I felt like I would answer in a really good way, like, oh, I know exactly what you should do. And then they would completely disregard my advice for some reason. And so when I learned about coaching, or when I would have those conversations, I'm like, oh, coaching would be perfect right here. And I don't really know what to do. So just the whole approach of like listening empathetically and asking questions, and then to see young people come up with really creative ways to deal with what issue they're talking about, or even just to become more self-aware, is so fun to be a part of. It gets me just really excited. And so, yeah, that's when I decided to really pursue it, when I was having all of these really hard conversations. And I'm like, I have no idea. Let's ask some questions about it. So, yeah. Right now, my coaching business is on, I want to call it maybe like a sabbatical or something. I recently had my first little guy 8 months ago. And so things kind of got put on hold, kind of a big part of life. So I like to say I'm kind of in this building learning phase where I'm reading a ton and interviewing people while interviewing. Yeah, because I'm asking people, okay, what did you do to start this? What kind of mistakes did you make, or what challenges did you come up with? And as I talk to people about that, I'm kind of applying it to my specific situation. And so I'm in a building phase right now, and I'm actually being coached around like what this summer is going to look like, so I can kind of stay on track and make sure to, have it become what I'm dreaming it to be. Okay, I get really excited I've got a lot of ideas about what I want the coaching business to look like, but in the immediate future, like kind of where I want to start is my husband and I lived in a community in Tulsa where your opportunities were just limited. Kids' opportunities were limited because of the zip code they were born in. And so I used to work in schools a ton. And at one of the schools I went to, they had the definition of equity, or their definition of equity up. And it said, equity is not everybody getting the same thing, but everybody getting what they need to be successful. And I just loved that, because people have different needs. And so I really want to start my coaching business in specifically a community where there's a big opportunity gap. And also I want to reach out to kids who would not otherwise have ever heard of coaching, or maybe, still think it is totally associated with sports and nothing else. And to help bring self-awareness in those situations and set goals and achieve them, because it's such a powerful an empowering thing that if you learn this at like the skill of coaching at a young age, I just think, man, if I would have learned this in high school, it could have saved me from quite a few different paths. And so I would love to share that with kids from different backgrounds. And the other part of that is the way that I would love to do it is I would love to partner with different nonprofits, or maybe one specific nonprofit, or partner with different schools, because I love working in schools, especially when you're coming in as a different entity. Kids think it's really cool, or they just have it's more novel to them. And so I would love to work with different schools or a specific school. A lot of it depends on where my husband and I live after he graduates from law school. So still kind of feeling it out and dreaming it up. For someone wanting to become a coach, I would definitely say, if you haven't already, to get a life coach. So you can experience just the magic of coaching. That feeling of becoming more self-aware is indescribable. I don't know. And so I would definitely say to get a coach, because it's really helpful to know what it feels like, especially when you're on the other side. And the thing that I did that I found was super helpful is I interviewed 3 or 4 different people who are already in their coaching careers or in the coaching field. And I just asked them questions like, what do you love about coaching? What's challenging? Why did you get involved? Kind of like stories like this, but a little more personal. And there wasn't a camera. But it was so helpful, and it just kind of affirmed and encouraged that this is definitely a path I want to pursue, and gave me some ideas of what to expect in the future. Okay, somebody younger than me, I would say you are the future, and that's not meant to scare you, it's meant to inspire you. The world needs you. We need people who are less judgmental and more empathetic. We need people who choose courage over comfort. Thank you, Brene Brown, for that one. So stay curious. I would say be dedicated to being a lifelong learner and dig deep. It's a lifelong journey, but it is so worth it. That path to greater self-awareness is so worth it, and it makes life so much richer. And so I would also say make sure you have fun along the way, because I mean, that just makes everything better. To me, coaching is being an agent of transformation and partnering with your client to help them cultivate self-awareness and create that positive and lasting change. So in a nutshell, I would say self-awareness. I don't want to be dramatic, but I'm going to reframe that and say I'm very passionate about this question, because coaching has changed the lens with which I view the world. I seriously could have a page-long list of the ways that it's changed my life, but I'll do the short list. The biggest thing is the self-awareness, just knowing, being aware of when I choose mindsets or what I'm doing as I'm doing it. So what I tell my husband is, I'm choosing to have a bad attitude right now. And he's like, can you unchoose it? Like, okay, what's the next step? But just being self-aware has been huge. It's changed how I listen to people. It's changed how I hold space. I still feel the need to talk in these silences, but I resist that temptation way more. Coaching has given me a gift to give to people. I feel like when I can listen and just ask questions, that's a huge gift to give to people. And I did not know that for most of my life. A couple other, this is the short list again. A couple other ways coaching has changed me is it's replaced curiosity for judgment. And I use that in so many different parts of my life, with strangers, with my family, with like loved ones, with myself. That's been so helpful and given me a lot more compassion, I think, and reframing things. Being able to look at something from a different perspective or step back and talk myself or even talk somebody else through looking at something through a different lens has been so life-changing. Most recently, I used that when I gave birth to my son, and reframing pain was huge. I was like, oh, this is pain with a purpose. Like every contraction brings me closer to my baby. I wasn't that chill during the process, but it was such a big deal to be able to think about it in a different way, because at least for birth, everybody's like, oh, it's super painful, just deal with it. And I was like, well, that's not encouraging. So my relationship with pain changed a lot going into that because of reframing. A few things come to mind. I had in Coach Training EDU, I love how we got to coach each other. And when you're like the volunteer person, and the the guru, the head of the training is coaching you. I had some really major like aha coaching moments in that helped me through some really tough stuff, which was amazing. But probably the biggest thing I learned about myself um, is how to listen. And I know that sounds really simple and like, oh, really? But I thought I was a good listener before, and then you do coach training, you're like, no. And that's changed my whole life. It's such a simple thing, but how to listen and, you're always going to have judgments, but how to set those aside and just be curious and in the moment. And it's a skill that I use in all of my relationships. And I have to still actively like, oh, you're not actually listening. But again, that self-awareness of like, I'm not really listening and I'm choosing not to. But it's been a really just a life-changing thing, like how to listen well and deeply and ask questions about it. I just feel like I had no idea that that was a thing. And I'm really grateful for it. My coaching business, a work in progress. But I think what Coach Training EDU did is it gave me the skills and the confidence to know I could actually do it. I never saw myself as a person. I've never been like, oh, I want to own my own business. So many people do that. And I'm like, good for you. But now I'm in a spot where I'm doing it. I'm going to do it. I'm in the process of it. And so that's been huge. The Coach Training EDU 2.0 training was extremely helpful in helping me find my brand or what I uniquely bring to the coaching profession and what value I can add to my clients. That was so helpful. But I really think the biggest thing it's done is just a network of like colleagues and friends and amazing people. I'm convinced you cannot be a life coach. Like all the people I meet, I'm like, you're amazing. Oh my gosh, this is awesome. And so just the community and the network of friends and colleagues who are working towards the same goal and like the mission. It's kind of like you're in the mission together. I love that about it. And I can call and ask questions or, hey, what did you do for your website? Hey, when you were starting this, and hopefully learn from other people's mistakes. And I know I'll make my own, but I'm a huge fan of not reinventing the wheel. And so just asking permission, like, hey, can I use your amazing idea? Because I find that like as coaches, there's enough people in the world for us all to coach. Like it's not insanely competitive, at least at Coach Training EDU. It's so collaborative and encouraging. And I really appreciate that about it because that's not how a lot of professions are. So my biggest influence is my faith in Jesus. That is definitely the driving force and my big why behind everything that I do. Other influences are definitely my husband. He is such a like consistent and steady and encouraging just source of love in my life. He's so supportive of my growth and my learning. And I feel like we sharpen each other. I'm really grateful for him. My family has been a huge influence. I grew up in a really loving and encouraging environment. I have two older brothers and a mom and dad, and I know that's not necessarily like a given in life. So I'm really grateful, especially the older I get. And I would say the other two biggest influences are my high school basketball coach and my college basketball coach. They poured so much into me. They taught me how to be a leader, how to get people on the same page, moving in the right direction towards a goal. And they really taught me how to have family outside of family. And that's been a really valuable lesson that I've applied to a lot of different life situations. So I'm really grateful for them. It is so hard to just choose one. I had some really phenomenal teachers, but I think that two of my college professors, one, her name was Chris Case, and she taught psychology classes. I think about her all the time because she was so encouraging to me and really just like kept pushing me to be, I don't know, the best version of myself. And I really appreciate that about her. And she also, I read The Lost Art of Listening in a counseling class she taught. And that was when I first thought like, oh, I'm a good listener. And then I was like, rude awakening. That was like the first tier of listening better. It's been a journey since. So I'm really grateful for her. And then another professor, I think he was a professor of youth ministry and religious studies, and his name was Steve Sherwood. But he taught me how to think outside of the box and just exposed me to so many different ideas about God and about youth ministry. And that has had a huge influence on how I interact with kids and kind of my theology.